I never thought a parking spot could destroy my entire sense of peace. It wasn't just a patch of asphalt, it was mine, reserved, a part of the home I had grown up in. Yet one morning as I stepped out, I realized something had changed. There was a shiny new sticker on my spot, a name I didn't recognize, a number I hadn't dialed. Panic gripped me before anger. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. How could someone just take my parking spot? How could the HOA do this without even informing me? I rushed to my car, fumbling with the keys, hoping this was some mistake, a misunderstanding. But as I looked around, neighbors peeked through their curtains, whispering, avoiding eye contact. That moment I felt smaller than ever, like a shadow of my own self. A sense of betrayal I couldn't put into words consumed me. This was my home, my life, and yet the very people entrusted to protect it had turned against me. I stormed into the HOA office. Their receptionist, a young woman with a tight smile, barely looked up. "Can I help you?" she asked, as if I were just another annoying visitor with complaints. "My parking spot, it's mine, it's been sold, by you," I stammered, my voice trembling more from disbelief than fear. She tilted her head, pretending confusion. "Sold, parking spots are sometimes reassigned. Maybe there's been a mix-up. Did you fill out the forms?" "No forms, nobody asked me, nobody told me. You don't just sell a spot that belongs to a resident without notifying them," I yelled, the words catching in my throat. From the corner of my eye, I noticed a man watching silently, the manager, I assumed. He had a calm, almost smug look, as if he knew something I didn't. That look, oh that look, it was the kind that made you feel small, powerless. I swallowed my pride and demanded to speak to him. "Yes, yes," the receptionist muttered, picking up the phone. Moments later, the manager emerged, a man in his late 40s with a sharp suit and sharper eyes. "Mr. Khan?" he asked, voice dripping politeness that barely masked indifference. "Yes, that's me. Tell me why my parking spot has been sold without my knowledge," I said, stepping closer. He sighed, like this was some minor inconvenience he was forced to explain. "Mr. Khan, HOA regulations allow us to reassign underused properties. Your spot was inactive for months, correct?" My jaw dropped. "Inactive? My spot wasn't inactive. I used it every day." My voice was shaking, fury and disbelief tangled together. He raised a finger, interrupting. "I'm just stating the facts. The paperwork is all in order. The new owner has every right to claim it." "You're lying," I shouted. "You didn't even try to contact me. I am the rightful owner. You can't just—" He cut me off, smirking faintly. "Mr. Khan, you may not realize, but the rules apply to everyone. Even developers' children must follow the same procedures." Something in his words triggered a deep, unexpected emotion in me. A memory flashed. My father, the man who had built this entire complex, had always told me, "One day you'll see how people betray what they can't understand." I clenched my fists. Betrayal wasn't just a word, it was a living, breathing thing that I was staring in the face. I left the office, barely noticing the cold wind that slapped my face. My car, my spot, my security, all stripped away in one morning. And yet something inside me stirred, a quiet fury. I wasn't just going to stand there. Back in my apartment, I sat in silence, my thoughts spinning uncontrollably. How had this happened? The HOA always followed protocol, or at least pretended to. Was there someone behind this, someone who knew my father? Or worse, someone who had never known him but wanted to challenge me personally? I pulled out old documents, deeds, and blueprints my father had left me. As I skimmed through them, a chilling thought struck me. What if this wasn't about a parking spot at all? What if it was a message, a test, a power play designed to see how far I could bend or break? The next day, I returned to the HOA, determined. I wanted names, dates, signatures, anything that could prove their wrongdoing. They smiled, nodded, and gave me the usual runaround. But this time, I wasn't going to be polite. I demanded access to all communications regarding my parking spot. Hours passed. I went through emails, internal memos, and sign forms, and then, buried in a folder marked confidential, I found it. The signature wasn't my own. Someone had forged it, someone inside the HOA. My heart pounded. This wasn't just negligence, this was deliberate. Someone had crossed a line, and now they had awakened a storm they couldn't imagine. I walked back to the lobby, documents in hand. The receptionist and the manager noticed my expression, and suddenly the air seemed thick with tension. "I found it. The signature is forged. Someone sold my spot without my permission," I said, my voice steady now, every word sharp as a blade. The manager's calm demeanor faltered for the first time. "Mr. Khan, perhaps you're overreacting." "Overreacting?" I interrupted. Do you know whose son I am? Do you even know who built this complex? My father didn't just give you a parking lot to play with, and I will make sure you regret every second of this deception." Something in their eyes shifted. For the first time, they realized that this wasn't just about a parking spot. This was about legacy, power, and pride, and I was prepared to protect it. I left again, but this time with a plan. Revenge wasn't my goal, not yet. First, I needed leverage, evidence, anything that could expose the HOA's corruption. I reached out to a few neighbors who had faced similar issues. Their stories were like pieces of a puzzle: arbitrary fines, unauthorized charges, threats to remove them from their homes. It wasn't just my parking spot, they were systematically taking control, exploiting trust. A week passed. Each day I collected more evidence. Every receipt, every email, every meeting minute became a weapon. I began noticing patterns: certain employees always involved, certain decisions always benefiting a hidden group of investors. The HOA wasn't just negligent, they were orchestrating this, and my spot was only the beginning. Then one night, as I reviewed documents in the dim light of my apartment, a realization hit me like a punch to the chest. Someone knew I was my father's son. This wasn't random. My father's influence had been a silent force in this neighborhood for decades, and someone wanted to see if I could be intimidated, if I would bend, or if I would fight. I clenched my fists. I wasn't a child anymore. I had grown up in the shadows of buildings my father designed, walked through corridors lined with his legacy, and now they had challenged me directly. The next morning, I returned to the scene. The new owner of my spot was waiting, an older man with an air of false confidence. "Morning," he said casually. "Blocking the spot, enjoying your new neighbor." "I want that spot back," I said calmly, holding back the storm within. "It doesn't belong to you." He laughed, a hollow, dismissive sound. "HOA says otherwise, rules are rules." I smiled faintly, coldly. "Rules? Let's just see how rigid the rules are when someone knows exactly what's been done illegally." He looked confused, but I didn't give him time to respond. I turned, pulled out the folder of evidence, and waved it casually. "Forged signatures, unauthorized sale, mismanagement. You're sitting on a powder keg, my friend. One wrong move and this whole operation comes crashing down." For the first time, I noticed fear flash in his eyes, a tiny crack in his confident facade, and it felt good, terribly satisfying. As I walked back to my apartment, I realized this wasn't just about a parking spot anymore. This was about respect, about the legacy my father left, about showing that no one, no system, no so-called authority could bully me into submission. But just as I felt a small victory, my phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "You should watch your back. Not everyone respects the Khan legacy like you think they do." My blood ran cold. Someone was watching, tracking my moves, anticipating my actions. And suddenly the game wasn't just mine to play. I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to back down, not now, not ever. But I also realized the storm ahead would be darker, more dangerous than I had imagined, and that was only the beginning. The next day, as I walked past my stolen parking spot, the man was gone and the space was empty. But a note had been left in chalk on the asphalt: "This isn't over, you don't know what you're dealing with." I knelt down, tracing the letters with my fingers. A chill ran down my spine. The message was clear: they knew who I was and they were ready to fight back. And that's when I understood I wasn't just reclaiming a parking spot. I was stepping into a battle that had been set long before I even existed. The message on the asphalt lingered in my mind like a shadow I couldn't shake. "You don't know what you're dealing with." The words pulsed with threat, a silent warning that someone had set the stage for me long before I realized it. I couldn't ignore it, couldn't pretend it was just a prank. Whoever was behind this knew me, my father, the legacy he had left, and now they wanted to see if I could survive their game. I started my day with caution. Every glance over my shoulder, every passing neighbor felt like a potential observer. I felt the walls of my own home shrinking, not from physical space but from the invisible gaze that was studying me, learning me, perhaps waiting for me to make a misstep. My father had always said power attracted both loyalty and betrayal, and now I felt it in its rawest form. I decided to dig deeper into the HOA's recent decisions. Using my father's old contacts, engineers, contractors, and longtime residents, I began tracing unusual transactions. Parking spots being sold, fees mysteriously adjusted, minor renovations suddenly funded without explanation. There was a clear pattern, and at the center of it, the same names kept appearing. Employees who had been with the HOA less than a year, a few shell companies registered under unknown owners, and a new manager who seemed to thrive on intimidation rather than fairness. It wasn't long before the first real confrontation came. I received a call from a neighbor, Mrs. Rahman, an elderly woman who had lived here almost as long as my father had. Her voice trembled as she whispered over the line, They've been threatening us too. They took our visitors' parking, tried to fine us for unauthorized storage, we don't know who to turn to. I listened carefully, every word sharpening the edge of my anger. This wasn't about a single parking spot anymore. This was about a pattern of harassment, of exploiting residents who didn't have power or knowledge of the system, and now I had the means to fight back. The next day I returned to the HOA office, not to plead, not to demand, but to watch. The manager was there, the same smug demeanor, pretending to review papers while his staff hovered nervously. I stepped into the lobby calm, composed, but my mind raced. I wasn't going to let them sense my strategy. I approached the counter, dropped the documents I had gathered onto the polished surface, and said simply, "Let's talk." The receptionist frowned. "Mr. Khan, we've already explained." "I'm not here to listen to excuses," I interrupted, voice steady. "I'm here to understand who authorized the sale of my parking spot, why it was forged, and why residents like Mrs. Rahman have been harassed. I have evidence, and I will use it." The manager looked up. For a moment his eyes betrayed him, a flicker of concern, of recognition. Then he smiled thinly, trying to regain composure. "Mr. Khan, you should be careful. Making accusations without proof can be dangerous." I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "Dangerous? You've been forging signatures, taking what doesn't belong to you, intimidating residents. I'm telling you, the danger is for you, and it's already here." A tense silence filled the room. The receptionist shuffled papers nervously. I knew then that they understood something I hadn't known when I first walked in. I wasn't just a resident anymore. I was a Khan. I was the son of the man who had built these walls, these streets, these homes, and they had just awakened a force they could not control. Later that night, I reviewed every document again, every transaction, every email, every minor complaint. The pattern was clear, deliberate, and audacious. Whoever was behind this had thought they could play a game with my family's legacy without consequences. They had underestimated me. Then came the unexpected twist. While going through the HOA's digital records, I found something chilling, a series of encrypted emails between the manager and an unknown third party. The language was formal but hinted at manipulation, at controlling outcomes in ways that weren't transparent to anyone except themselves. And buried within these emails was a line that froze my blood. "The Khan factor complicates matters. Proceed carefully." Someone had been planning for me specifically. They knew my connection, my potential influence, and they had mapped out a strategy to challenge me. This wasn't just opportunistic, it was personal. I realized I needed allies, but trust was a scarce commodity here. Most residents feared the HOA, some were complicit. I reached out discreetly, contacting those I believed were sincere. With each conversation, a network of supporters began to form, quiet but determined. We shared stories of intimidation, of rules twisted, of power misused, and with every tale my resolve hardened. The next morning, I decided to confront the new owner of my parking spot again. I wanted to send a message, subtle but firm. As I approached, he looked up, startled. "Back again?" he asked, feigning casualness. "Yes," I replied, calm, controlled. "And I'm bringing proof that this spot is mine. It's not about fighting you, it's about correcting a wrong that should never have happened in the first place." He laughed nervously. "You really think showing papers will change anything? HOA says." I cut him off. HOA's words mean nothing when evidence proves otherwise, and I assure you, the moment I present this, every signature, every transaction, every lie will unravel. You'll wish you never taken this spot. He faltered, confusion flickering across his face. For the first time, I saw uncertainty, fear, the beginning of realization that I wasn't just another complainer. I was someone with the power, knowledge, and determination to expose the truth. Days passed. Tensions escalated. The HOA seemed to tighten, making more arbitrary decisions, perhaps hoping to intimidate me. Notices appeared on doors, fines were suddenly imposed, and whispers spread through the neighborhood, but I remained steadfast. Every move I made was calculated, every communication documented. Then came the call that changed everything. An unknown number, the voice familiar yet disguised. "Stop digging or your father's legacy will be in danger. This is bigger than a parking spot. Step back." My heart pounded, but I didn't flinch. I realized then that the stakes were far higher than I had imagined. Someone had orchestrated a plan to test me to see if I could protect not just my property but the honor and reputation of my family. The parking spot was just the opening move in a far larger game. I knew confrontation was inevitable. Waiting would only give them the advantage. I began devising a strategy to reveal the truth without giving away my position. Emails, forged signatures, intimidation, all needed to be exposed in a way that could not be denied or ignored. That night, as I plotted my next move, a shadow passed my window. I froze. A figure hidden in the darkness disappeared before I could identify them. The message was clear: I was being watched, every step calculated, every action monitored, but fear had no place here, only resolve. The following morning, I noticed subtle changes around the neighborhood. A sense of quiet tension hung in the air, as if everyone knew something was about to happen but didn't know what. And then I saw him, the manager, outside the HOA office, speaking to someone in hushed tones, glancing repeatedly toward my apartment. I realized the game had escalated. This was no longer about property or parking spots. This was about power, influence, and control, and they had underestimated the son of the man who had built it all. I decided it was time to make a move that would change everything. Not a reckless one, not a loud confrontation, but a calculated strike that would expose the corruption at its core. I gathered all the evidence, organized it meticulously, and prepared to confront not just the manager or the new owner, but the entire network that had been exploiting residents. As I left my apartment that evening, documents in hand, I felt the weight of what was to come. The air was thick with anticipation. Every glance over my shoulder, every whisper, every silent observation reminded me that I was stepping into dangerous territory. But for the first time since this began, I felt a surge of power, of clarity. I wasn't just reclaiming a parking spot. I was reclaiming justice, my family's honor, and the integrity of the community my father had built. But as I approached the HOA office, a thought chilled me. Someone had warned me, "Step back or your father's legacy will be in danger." And I realized they weren't bluffing. The deeper I went, the more I would uncover and the more danger I would face. I took a deep breath. The documents, the evidence, the proof, it was all here, and I was ready. As I stepped inside, the receptionist looked up, startled. The manager, noticing me, straightened immediately. "Mr. Khan," he began, but I cut him off. "No introductions, no excuses. I have evidence. I know what you've done, and I'm here to correct it. Every forged signature, every misused rule, every intimidation tactic, you're about to be exposed." His eyes widened, fear breaking through the mask of calm authority he had worn so effortlessly. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain: the game had begun and there was no turning back. And yet, even as I prepared to strike, the message I had received lingered ominously in my mind. Not everyone respects the Khan legacy like you think they do. Somewhere in the shadows, someone was waiting, watching, ready to counter, and I realized the true challenge had just begun. The next morning, the atmosphere in the neighborhood was unusually tense. Even birds seemed quieter, and the usual hum of early traffic felt muted. I walked past my stolen parking spot, eyes fixed on the asphalt, my mind replaying the warnings I had received. Someone was watching, someone was waiting, and they had made it clear that they would not let me move forward without resistance. Inside the HOA office, the receptionist avoided my gaze and the manager paced nervously. I knew my presence had already rattled them. I stepped in, placing the folder of evidence firmly on the desk. "This is everything," I said. "Every forged signature, every illegal reassignment, every intimidation tactic. I want names, explanations, and accountability." The manager paused, his usual composed facade cracking. "Mr. Khan, you don't understand what you're holding. These matters, they're not simple. There are agreements, contracts, legal loopholes." I leaned forward, voice firm. "Contracts that are illegal are worthless. Loopholes don't protect lies or theft. I want to know who authorized the sale of my spot and why no one thought to notify me." The tension in the room was almost tangible. Then, unexpectedly, the receptionist spoke up, her voice shaking. "Sir, there's someone you should see, someone who's been handling this from the start." From a side door, a woman emerged, mid-30s, sharp eyes, poised yet cautious. "Mr. Khan," she said, her tone neutral, "I'm the compliance officer. I've been reviewing transactions, but I was told not to act without managerial approval. The sale of your parking spot, it was authorized internally without proper procedure. I tried to flag it, but..." Her voice trailed off, her expression pained. I studied her carefully. She wasn't lying. Her demeanor, her hesitation, it all pointed to someone trapped between orders and conscience. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I need you to work with me. If we're exposing corruption, we do it accurately, legally, and decisively." Her eyes widened slightly, a mix of fear and relief. "Are you serious? You want to take them down?" I nodded, not for revenge but for justice, for the residents, for the truth. Together, we began mapping out a plan. Every transaction, every forged signature, every intimidation tactic had to be documented, verified, and presented in a way that left no room for denial. This wasn't about anger, it was about strategy, precision, and exposing the rot at the heart of the HOA. Over the next few days, I worked tirelessly. I interviewed residents discreetly, recorded conversations, and collected documents that had been overlooked or hidden. And with every piece of evidence, the story became clearer. The parking spot was only the tip of the iceberg. A network of deception, greed, and intimidation had been quietly operating under the guise of HOA management. One evening, while reviewing files late at night, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number: "Stop digging or someone you care about will regret it." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't a bluff anymore. They had realized I was moving too close to the truth, and now they were issuing threats. But I refused to back down. Fear would not control me. The next day, I noticed subtle changes in the neighborhood. Employees who usually lingered around suddenly disappeared. The new owner of my parking spot avoided my gaze when I passed, and whispers followed me wherever I went. It was clear. My actions were causing ripples, and the HOA hierarchy was reacting. Then came the confrontation I had been anticipating. I received an anonymous tip to visit a nearby coffee shop at a specific time. As I arrived, I noticed a man sitting in the corner, his posture casual but his eyes sharp, calculating. He waved me over. "You're digging too deep," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "This isn't just about a parking spot, you're stepping into a game bigger than you realize." I studied him carefully. "Who are you? What is this game?" He leaned back, smirking faintly. "I represent interests that prefer to remain hidden. Your father's influence, your name, it complicates things. But make no mistake, you're being tested. How far will you go? How much are you willing to risk?" I didn't flinch. "I'll go as far as I need to. I won't allow corruption to continue unchecked in my father's legacy. And if anyone threatens innocent people, I'll expose them, no matter who they are." His expression shifted, a flicker of respect, or was it surprise, crossing his face. "Bold, but remember, knowledge alone doesn't protect you. People will move, manipulate, and strike in ways you cannot predict." I nodded slowly. "I'm aware, but I'm not acting blindly. I have evidence, witnesses, and strategy. I'm prepared." He leaned in, whispering, "Then be careful. Not everyone around you is loyal. Trust is scarce. One wrong move and you won't just lose a parking spot, you'll risk everything your family built." I left the coffee shop, mind racing. The warning only strengthened my resolve. The fight wasn't just about a parking spot anymore, it was about uncovering the truth, protecting residents, and defending my father's legacy. Back in my apartment, I reviewed all the evidence one last time. Every document, every email, every recorded conversation was carefully organized. I realized the next step had to be public exposure, something undeniable, something that would force the HOA to confront its own corruption. But as I prepared to act, a shadow fell across my window. A subtle movement, almost imperceptible but enough to send a jolt through me. Someone had been watching my every move, tracking me, ensuring they knew when I was vulnerable. I tightened my fists, feeling the surge of determination and fear blend into a sharp edge of focus. They wanted to intimidate me, to scare me into stopping, but the closer they came, the more they revealed their weakness. Fear wasn't my weapon. Knowledge, strategy, and courage were. The next morning, armed with my folder of evidence and a clear plan, I approached the HOA office. The receptionist's usual smugness was replaced by unease. The manager, noticing me, froze briefly. I stepped inside, placing the folder on the desk with deliberate force. "This ends today," I said. "Every forged signature, every misused rule, every act of intimidation, it's all here, and it's time to take responsibility." The manager's face paled. He tried to speak, but no words came. For the first time, the calm authority he wielded so effortlessly was gone. Suddenly, the compliance officer appeared behind him, whispering urgently, "Sir, they're planning to fight back legally and publicly. They have the evidence." The manager's eyes darted around, realizing the position he had put himself in. The room was silent except for my steady breathing and the faint rustle of papers. Then unexpectedly, the new owner of my parking spot entered. He looked at me, then at the folder, and finally back at the manager. What's happening?" he asked, voice shaky. "This," I said calmly, "is justice. You've all misused power, ignored residents, and violated trust. It ends now, and I assure you there's no negotiation." Fear, confusion, and realization swept through the room. For the first time, the true weight of their actions was visible, and I knew in that moment that I had gained the upper hand. But even as the tension peaked, a new thought struck me. This wasn't over. Whoever had been orchestrating from the shadows, the unknown party that had warned me, tracked me, and tried to intimidate me, was still out there, and they weren't going to stop. I clenched my fists, determination burning in my chest. They had underestimated me once. They wouldn't do it again. As I stepped out of the HOA office, the neighborhood felt different, charged, tense, expectant. Residents glanced at me, some with hope, some with fear, and I knew the real challenge was just beginning. Because the people who had orchestrated this, who had tried to manipulate, intimidate, and control, they weren't finished, and neither was I. The air felt heavy as I walked back toward my apartment. The neighborhood, once familiar and comforting, now seemed like a chessboard where every glance, every movement carried weight. The HOA had been shaken, but I knew the real players, the ones orchestrating everything from the shadows, were still at large. They had underestimated me once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. That evening, I called the compliance officer. "We need to act fast," I said. "The HOA can't recover from this quietly. If we expose everything now, it will be impossible for them to continue their games." She hesitated, voice low. "Are you sure? Once we do this, there's no turning back. They will come after you directly. And whoever been guiding these actions from the shadows, I'm not sure they'll stop at intimidation." I swallowed, determination stealing my voice. "I'm aware, but justice isn't about safety, it's about truth, and truth is on our side." We set a plan into motion. The evidence had to reach every resident, every authority, every possible channel. Emails, documents, witness testimonies, it all needed to be distributed in a way that left no room for manipulation. We worked through the night, verifying details, cross-referencing information, and ensuring nothing could be dismissed as fabrication. The next morning, I arrived at the HOA office with the final stack of documents. The receptionist froze upon seeing me, as did the manager. Even the new owner of my parking spot lingered nearby, nervous, unsure of what was about to unfold. I placed the documents on the desk. "This is your final warning," I said. "Everything you've done illegally is here, every forged signature, every harassment, every misuse of power. The moment these are made public, you will be held accountable." The manager's face went pale. He tried to speak, but no words came. The receptionist looked away, avoiding eye contact, fear etched in every line of her face. The compliance officer stepped forward, giving me a subtle nod of reassurance. Then came the moment that changed everything. Residents began arriving, neighbors I had quietly contacted, people who had suffered under the HOA's manipulations. One by one, they shared their stories, lending weight to the evidence I had gathered. The office, once a place of smug authority, now felt exposed, vulnerable, and raw. A hush fell over the room. The weight of truth pressed down on every face, every whispered conversation, every hurried glance. I realized that finally the balance of power had shifted. The people who had tried to intimidate, manipulate, and control were cornered, and the very residents they had sought to suppress were now witnesses, allies, and catalysts for change. But even as the tension reached its peak, a new message arrived on my phone, unknown number, same chilling tone. "You've done well, but the real game begins now. Trust no one." I looked up at the assembled residents, their eyes reflecting a mix of hope and fear. And I understood, the shadows still lingered. Whoever had orchestrated this entire series of events, watching, guiding, manipulating, they hadn't been defeated yet. They were still out there, ready to strike. I took a deep breath. "This ends today," I said firmly. "Not because I'm strong alone, but because together we stand. Every abuse of power, every act of deception will be exposed, and anyone who tries to hide behind authority will be held accountable." The room was silent, the weight of my words settling over everyone. Then, slowly, one of the neighbors stepped forward, nodding. Others followed. A wave of collective resolve spread through the room, replacing fear with determination. The manager swallowed hard, realizing the scope of what had just been unleashed. The facade of control, the power he had wielded so effortlessly, had crumbled in an instant. For the first time, he understood that manipulation and intimidation could only succeed when the powerless stayed silent, and now silence had been shattered. Then, unexpectedly, the compliance officer handed me a folder. "There's more," she said quietly. "Documents, transactions, emails, they've been hiding this for months. The bigger picture, it's deeper than we imagined." I opened it and my eyes widened. This wasn't just about forged signatures or parking spots. There were financial irregularities, hidden agreements with investors, attempts to manipulate property values, and even threats against residents who dared to challenge the system. The scale of corruption was massive, systemic, and meticulously hidden. I realized the shadows had been watching for decades, shaping the community in ways no one could have imagined. And now they had underestimated me. I turned to the manager. "Do you understand the gravity of this?" I asked. He nodded slowly, fear etched into every line of his face. Yes, I understand." "Good," I said, "because you're going to take responsibility. Every transaction, every decision, every abuse of power, it will be reported, verified, and made public. There will be no hiding, and for anyone else involved, justice will find you." The room remained tense, every breath measured, every heartbeat loud. I felt the culmination of weeks of planning, investigation, and courage boiling into a single moment of reckoning. Then, a knock at the door. Everyone froze. The manager's eyes darted toward it, a flicker of panic crossing his face. Slowly, the door opened and a familiar figure stepped in. It was the man from the coffee shop, the one who had warned me about the unseen forces. He looked at me, expression unreadable. "Well done," he said simply. "You've exposed the surface, but the deeper network, they're still active, and they won't take this lightly." I met his gaze. "I know. But this is where it begins. We've uncovered their methods, their manipulation, their deception. We're ready for whatever comes next." He nodded slowly. "Courage and knowledge are powerful, but remember, trust is rare. And sometimes the most dangerous threats come from within, from those you least expect." I understood immediately. The battle wasn't over. Exposing the HOA's corruption was only the first step. The real challenge, the hidden puppeteers, the orchestrators of chaos, were still out there, watching, waiting. Yet for the first time I felt a sense of control, of power rooted not in authority or fear, but in truth, evidence, and resolve. The parking spot had been a test, a spark that ignited a larger revelation. And now I was ready to face the consequences, the threats, and the challenges that lay ahead. I glanced around the room. Residents, once intimidated and silent, now stood together, united in purpose. The manager and his staff, once confident and untouchable, now faced the weight of accountability. And I, standing at the center of it all, realized something profound. The legacy of my father was not just in buildings or land, but in the courage, integrity, and resolve it inspired. As I left the HOA office that evening, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. I paused at my reclaimed parking spot, running my hand over the asphalt. It wasn't just concrete beneath my fingers, it was a symbol of truth, justice, and the fight against corruption. And somewhere in the shadows, I knew the unseen forces were still watching. But now I was no longer just a son reacting to an injustice. I was a force to be reckoned with, a guardian of truth, a protector of legacy, and someone who had learned that even in the face of intimidation and betrayal, courage could illuminate the darkest corners. The message I had received earlier echoed in my mind. Not everyone respects the Khan legacy like you think they do. I smiled faintly. They were right to fear me now. Because I wasn't just reclaiming a parking spot, I was reclaiming justice, integrity, and the honor of everything my father had built. And I knew, without a doubt, that no shadow could ever extinguish that light. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time I felt certain I would emerge victorious.